Welcome to Spartan Up Podcast. We are your grit and resiliency partner. We're coming at you every week, sometimes all week. And so if you can, subscribe on YouTube so that you get alerted immediately when these powerful guests come into our radar. Now, today, we had the pleasure of interviewing this woman, Kara Goucher, Olympian.
Incredible. Not just an Olympian. She's a two-time Olympian in 3 different distances, 5K, 10K, and marathon. Mind-blowing. Those are 3
Epitomizes Spartan.
Totally different distances. She came 3rd at the Boston Marathon. Truly an unbelievable world-class athlete. But what's going to be more important for our listeners and our viewers, who she is as a human being. She shows so much integrity and just resilience in who she is in life and the things she's taken on. We'll talk about that, and I think you're all going to find it. She makes us all better people.
Stay through to the end because we had the pleasure already of listening to her, and at the end, Johnny and I are going to distill some thoughts. We're going to highlight the things that are takeaways for you so that you could be an Olympian at home. You might not take 3rd in the Boston Marathon, but you'll be better.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by True Form Runner. Conquer your next race with a complete training solution from Spartan and True Form. The Spartan True Form Trainer will redefine your running, improve your form, and reduce injury. Save 10% with the code SPARTAN10 at trueformrunner.com/Spartan. That's trueformrunner.com/Spartan.
I'm Dr. L, Chief Mind Doc for Spartan. I'm here with Kara Goucher, who I'm sort of fan geeking out a little bit because I've started trail running recently in my move to Colorado, and I'm sitting here with like an amazing ultra runner, beast, marathoner, now trail runner. So let's like rewind and not start there, but start just from the beginning. Like, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I am a runner through and through. I started running when I was 6 with my grandfather. I ran in high school. I ran in college, transitioned to be a professional, was really a track runner for a big bulk of my career. After the 2008 Olympics, I decided to focus on the marathon or try the marathon, and then I fell in love with it, and there was really no turning back. I ran track occasionally, but really I was all about the roads. And then... yeah, I've just gotten older and slowed down a little bit on the roads, but I still really love the lifestyle of training for something and competing. And so I've decided to see what else is out there. And awesome. I ran my first trail race in June, and I'm going to run my first ultra in November. So I still just run a lot.
It's awesome. Yeah. So I'm curious, run was in like all of those sentences,
yes.
Right? So from the beginning, tell me, was it something you loved or something you knew you were good at, or both?
You know, I loved the freedom. I come from a really athletic family.
Okay.
And if you name a sport, I promise you I played it or tried it or did it at some point in my life. And I'm glad that I did that because I can really appreciate any sport except for football. Other than football, I can appreciate pretty much any sport because I have tried it. But I was never comfortable. I was always really having to think, where is my ski pole planting? How is my wrist on the racket? And running was the first thing I did where I could just go.
Awesome.
And I could just listen to my heart and lungs and just do it. And I didn't realize I was good at it until I got into junior high. And that was a double-edged sword, I think. And it has been throughout my whole career, right? Because being good is fun, but then it also brings a level of expectation. And sometimes you start to focus on that side instead of the love side.
Right.
So it's been something that I'm 41 now. I've probably been dealing with that since I was 12. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you find that position to be in where there's something that you're incredibly good at, but then something that you love, but maybe even though you're so good at it, the more you do it, the less you might love it. Like, I feel like sometimes that's a really hard balance for people to find. So how do you find that position to be in where you love what you do, but you also, feel like you can keep doing it?
I mean, to be honest, it's kind of something I've had to work on throughout my whole career.
Yeah.
Because the better you run, I won a medal at the World Championships, and then it became, what is next? What is next? And instead of appreciating the journey, I was really just always obsessed with what was next. And so then it really became more of a job and less of a passion and love. And so, I mean, it kind of went like this throughout my elite career of,
wavy, yeah.
Going back to my roots, going home to Minnesota, running on the trails I grew up on, right. Reminding myself why I did it, and then getting back to the competitive side and kind of climbing that ladder. And I mean, to be honest, there is no perfect solution. I think it's kind of like, it's always kind of a balance that you're trying to figure out.
What was your goal? Was your goal to be the best? Was your goal to be the best you? Like, where does the competitive piece fit in for you?
You know, I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota on Spam and goulash, and I know that I'm not the best athlete in the world. I always knew I wasn't put on this earth to be a world record holder. It's just not my genetic makeup and my pedigree, but I wanted to know how good I could get.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I also believed in opportunity. You know, the big dogs mess up and I'm ready and I'm going to pounce.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always just wanted to, I always wanted to try to podium, but even when I knew it was kind of unrealistic, but it was more like, could I do that? Could I have an opportunity here and take advantage of it? So I really wanted to see how good I could be. But if I'm being totally honest, I always knew I wasn't the best, but I just hoped that could outsmart people.
Right. That's amazing. And then, so you have this certain like line of running for a really long time, right? Like road running, marathon running, and then you make this pivot, trail. So talk about that. Like, what was the pivot like from you to from that into trail?
Yeah. So in 2016, I tried out for my third Olympic team in the marathon, and only the top 3 go, and I got 4th. And it was pretty devastating because my son and my husband and I had moved from Oregon to Colorado to try to make this one last team. And I always thought, oh, I'll run in Rio and then I'll retire and I'll have closure on this great career. And instead it was just kind of like, well, that doesn't feel good, you know? So
Right.
if I'm being totally, but I was 38. So at that time, I kind of went through this 2 years of like kind of turmoil and depression of trying to get back to who I used to be, even though I knew deep inside I was aging, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a couple years of just like struggling, trying to be who I used to be and not really embracing where I was. And finally, about a year ago, I just was like, actually last July, I turned 40.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I am a master's athlete. And I cannot believe that I'm a master's athlete, but I am. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm
Right.
going to embrace it. And it just changed for me
Mm-hmm.
moving forward. And I started to stay healthy. And I had a full marathon training cycle. And then I was like, what sounds fun now?
Oh, I
And,
love
you know,
that.
running another marathon, I'm sure I'll do it again. But at the time, that didn't sound fun. What sounded fun was scaring myself and going out and doing something scary.
Was it the technicality or the newness?
Yeah, honestly, it was both. I am a shuffler, and I have spent, since I was a kid, basically on the track or the very flat, you know, or immaculate road.
Right.
So now all of a sudden there's all of these challenges. There's roots and unevenness, which was scary to me. But also, you know, I have validated my running through splits my whole life.
Right.
I, you know, was staring at my watch and staring at my split. And did I meet my split? Did I not meet my split? And so the fact of just letting go of that, in the end, it's been really, really freeing, but it was really, really hard at first because I didn't have that validation of, oh yeah, and I hit my pace and I ran whatever minute miles and
Yeah. So say more about that, because I think that is a really, really important piece for anyone who's listening in on this, in the sense that like we have certain measurements that we're attached to, right? And in a lot of ways they serve our ego, and what can actually serve us best is when we let go of those measurements. So talk a little bit about like what that was like for you to really step away from that as a measurement.
I mean, honestly, it was really hard.
Yeah.
I would go for a run with someone. Anyone that asked me to go for a run, I would go, because even though I've lived in Boulder on and off for 12 or 13 years, I still don't know the trail systems very well. And someone would say, oh, we're going to go for 15 miles. And I'd think, okay, that'll take us 2 hours. And then
Right.
it would take us 3 hours. And I would be like panicking, like, I don't like this. We just split an 18-minute mile. I'm freaking out a little bit, you know? But over time, I started to understand that it is such a different beast, and it's more about what nature gives you and what the trail gives you versus this hardcore split. So I had to kind of change my thinking from looking in my logbook and seeing the times I wanted
Right.
to just appreciating each experience. But that was a really big mental shift, because one is like
Right.
hardcore data,
Right.
and one is like a feeling and
Yes.
an emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that so fascinating, not only in sport, but just in other areas of our life, when we really move away from like the concretization of something, like concrete, yes, this is good, or yes, this is not, or no, this is bad, to something that's just more of a feeling. It's a big transition for people.
It really is. I mean, even in the race that I did, my whole life has been about on the podium. Are you on the podium or not?
Right.
And if you're not going to be on the podium, sometimes you just shut it down because you're like, this isn't worth it. I didn't train this hard to not be on the podium. So I'm going to shut it down, drop out, and I'm going to refocus on something in 2 months. So when I was running this race and I was suffering quite a bit and I realized I wasn't going to be on the podium, my initial reaction was like, I should just shut it down, stop running.
Right.
Like find another trail race later on. And then I had to like really like get out of that mindset of like, this isn't about being in the top 3. This is about the experience. This is about, finishing what you started. So like this whole experience for me, I know it maybe sounds crazy to some other people, like, it's not that big of a deal. You didn't finish in the top 3, but it's really been for me, like a whole new world and
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, and I can imagine, like what I'm hearing you say really without necessarily using these words, so I'm pulling them out of you, is like a shift in identity, maybe like shifting from kind of how you've seen yourself and the way that you've kind of operated to a different new Kara.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, in those 2 years where I was really struggling, it was like, can I justify continuing to seek sponsorship, continuing to have time away from my husband and son to train when there's definitely no Olympic medal at the end of it?
Right.
Can I justify all that time? Can I justify travel? Can I justify training up in the mountains when I know for a fact there's no shot of an Olympic medal at the end of it, or no Olympic team even?
Right.
And that I struggled with that, but at the end I decided I got to be happy.
So it is, and yeah, so that's I think a really good point. Is it the happiness that justifies it for you?
It is. I mean, I still feel really, really alive, and I love my day. I bring my son to school. I go train for a couple hours. I pick him up on days he has practice. I do another training session, and I just feel like I still feel like myself.
Right.
The result is different, and maybe the output on paper is different, but I still feel like I'm living the lifestyle that I want to be living, and I'm still challenging myself. It just looks different.
I love that. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to get more into that. How do you challenge yourself so that you can really step into who you want to be?
Okay, we're going to be right back to that episode. But first, Johnny, question for you. You're a race director. You're around races all the time. You're around the podium. What do you think's the one obstacle that people aren't training that much for?
You know what? We're standing on treadmill, so it's obviously going to say, but it's running. No, it really is.
It is.
Everyone's training for obstacles, which is great. Spartan Race is all about obstacles, but you know what's actually really all about? It's about running between those obstacles.
Yeah.
So you can climb the rope fast, you can throw the spear better, but if you're not running fast and well, you're never going to become a better racer. The key there is not just the fast. We got a lot of people out there running really fast, but very few people actually learn how to run.
Right.
And the great thing about this machine, this True Form that I absolutely love about this machine, it forces you to run properly. It's human powered. So if I'm just standing here, it's not moving. A normal treadmill, it starts moving for me, and all I have to do is keep up with it.
Right.
And if I'm running poorly, I just keep running poorly, and it keeps moving, right?
Right, and this one's like chest up, you find your center of balance, and then it like really intuitively and organically helps guide where your body should be.
Yeah, 100%.
And, I mean, we all have friends and stuff that have got injured running, too much impact, improper foot placement, like, it's not an uncommon thing that we see amongst athletes, and it's like one of those things that you don't think about until you think about it, and it's like, this obviously makes sense.
And traditionally, the way people train for running is they run more. Everyone thinks practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Imperfect practice makes injury. So if you want to learn how to run perfectly, run properly, go to trueformrunner.com. They have an incredible program.
Save 10% with the code SPARTAN10 at trueformrunner.com/Spartan. That's trueformrunner.com/Spartan.
And now let's get back to this episode.
All right, we're back. We just went for an amazing trail race. It was very, very
It's
quick.
amazing.
And now we're sitting back in the grass. So we were talking about challenge and challenging yourself. And in my own experience, I know that when there's a particular arena that I choose to challenge myself in, inevitably that sort of bleeds into other arenas in my life, right? Like if I'm challenging myself out on Spartan course races, then I call myself up to be more challenged in my parenting, right? Or in my own private practice. So I'm curious for you, if shifting this identity and moving into sort of a new position for you that was hard, did that bleed into other areas of your life where then you were maybe more open and available to more challenging things?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I have, I've just spoken out about more things that matter to me, especially in the last year, which totally coincides with my shift to trail racing. So I think it just being vulnerable and surviving it makes you realize that there's so much more you could do, and there's so many more challenges you could face.
Right.
It's scary, but then when you survive it, you're like, okay, well, that wasn't that bad, like what else? And so it's made me just speak up a little bit more on things that matter to me and try to push for change in other areas of my life.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And so then I'm curious too, in the arena of challenge, like, how do you get your mind in that position? How do you get your mind in a position to be accepting of something that's difficult?
You know, I just never want to be so afraid I don't try. You know, like I'm one of those people that doesn't want regret. No, I'm not crazy. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to be Alex Hammond and I'm going to like free solo something. You know, like I understand that I have limits, but if something crosses my mind and I'm like, I wonder if I could do that, I don't want to be so afraid of like someone else's definition of failure or my definition of failure that I can't even try.
Yeah.
So I always just kind of remind myself, like, what's the worst that happens? Like I have to walk or I'm last place. Like that's the worst thing that happens. I mean, it's really not that bad.
Right.
And maybe I discover something about myself along the way, which is what always ends up happening. And so I think life is too short to, I mean, again, within reason, life is too short to be afraid to try things and to be vulnerable. Like you can't be great at everything. You can't be bad at everything. Like if something is interesting to you, and the things that make me the most anxious are the things that I'm most likely to like try.
Right. Now, you brought up earlier to your age a few times, and now you're 40, right?
I'm 41.
Now you're 41. Okay, so talk about what is that like to be 41 when a lot of people feel like, well, we're in our 40s, we should be kind of shutting down, beginning to close up shop. And I'm almost 40, and I'm like, let's open those doors and party. So what is that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, coming from the elite side, it's really hard because your whole identity is on how fast you are. And then I don't care how many times someone says to me, age is nothing but a number. I mean, like, physiology is real.
Right.
And you do start to slow down, but that doesn't mean that your journey is not worth still taking.
I love that.
I just started to feel like, why is there this expiration on you're being inspirational or you're trying new things? Like, just because all of a sudden I'm 40 and I'm 5 minutes slower in the marathon than I used to be, so then it's just like not worth doing anymore. Like, that's actually crazy.
Right.
And so it's sort of dumping this idea of like, if I'm not super fast, it's not worth doing, and saying, I still love it. What other ways can I challenge myself? And, you know, like, I'm sure I'll still go run a marathon again, even though there's no way I'll ever run a PR in it again.
Right.
But that's okay.
Right.
But that was another thing that was hard for me to wrap my head around, because the world I lived in was, once you can't make an Olympic team, you're basically extinct. You need to go away and move on. And I was like, but I don't want to go. I really, really like it here.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So just finding my own space and my own path that allows me to be a part of it in a way that makes me feel good about myself and not, you know, like, I still have value. You're going to have value when you're 40. You're actually the same exact person with the same exact skills, with the same exact life experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that lesson is really important for our audience, in the sense that, like, again, when we focus so much on product, like what's at the end, right? Then we lose the importance of process. Like, how did we get there? And I'm a parent. You mentioned being a parent as well. How do you parent your child to begin to think that way? Because grades seem to be so important, and whether you made the A team or the B team, like, how do you focus on process being a critical piece?
You know, we tell our son, we don't care as long as you try. You may be the world's best soccer player. You may be the worst. You may be the world's best drummer. You may be the worst. But if you try, you're going to learn, and it's going to push you forward as a human. And honestly, it's good when you're not good, because then you learn how to work with others. You learn how to be humble. You learn how to depend on others. And then you're going to find your thing that you're really good at, and it's going to remind you not to be a dick, not to be a jerk. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's going to make you appreciate it.
Yeah.
You know, like, I hated being the suckiest person on all my sports teams growing up. But then when I got to running, it made me really appreciate it, and it made me realize I'm never going to be rude to the last person on the team, because I am that person in basketball.
Right.
And they are trying super hard. I mean, I tried so hard. And it doesn't mean I'm a better person because I'm good at running. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it doesn't
100%.
Yeah, so it's just all about, like, new experiences, trying things, and, like, vulnerability is a big thing for me. Being vulnerable in your life and knowing that that's okay. Sometimes your feelings get hurt. Sometimes you don't succeed.
Right.
You know, like, I trained so hard to make that third Olympic team, and my son was there, and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But you know what? There were so many takeaways from it,
Exactly.
which is that you can do everything the right way and want something, and sometimes you still just don't get it.
That's right.
But that doesn't mean it wasn't worth trying to do.
Right.
Because it was.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I mean, I do think that we if we give ourselves permission to gain wisdom and knowledge from the things that we don't get, like, I think that we're more winners than gaining wisdom and knowledge from what we get.
For sure. And let's face it, in life, the times you get what you want are so much smaller than the times that you don't. You
Right.
know? And if you're only happy in life when you get what you want, that's a pretty It's going to be a pretty wah-wah existence.
Exactly. Totally. Okay. So we usually like to end with, like, what are 3 takeaways that you can provide to our audience and they can kind of use some of this wisdom, your wisdom and your own experience, and apply that to their own life? Like, what would 3 pieces of advice that you could give?
Well, I think I'll just go from where my life is right now.
Yeah, great.
So I would say, don't be afraid to age. It's not scary. It's actually really fun, and it allows you, I mean, when you're in that elite side and you're young, you go for it. But as you start to age, it allows you to open up and try things you never would have tried before. So there's a whole world out there that will be there when you're ready.
That's amazing.
I would say, like, do scary things. Like, I can't even tell you how scary it was for me to run the trails, and it is still. But it makes me feel really, really alive. And it makes, I've made 2 Olympic teams. I've won a medal at the World Championships. I've been on the podium in Boston, New York marathons. I've never been more proud than when I finished that trail race.
I love that.
Seriously, that's like the most proud I've been of myself. And, I got my head kicked, And the third thing would just, it's kind of the same thread, but, like, just be vulnerable in life.
Yeah.
Because it really makes you appreciate other people, relate to other people, and it really opens up the door for new experiences in life that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Right. That's amazing. I love that. And I think that hopefully when our audience hears that too, in vulnerability, they hear strength and not weakness.
Oh, yeah. When I admitted that I was afraid and admitted that I felt small, it took all that power away from those feelings. And all of a sudden I was like, well, I already said it. So now what? Nothing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it actually makes you way stronger and way more in control of your life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
Thanks
Congrats.
for having me.
Good luck out there on those trails.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Awesome. Congratulations. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
One other thing that I really enjoyed about Kara, she actually sat on a panel that we had of trail racers at Tahoe, and she's the first to say she's a new trail racer. She's been this incredible athlete at the top level. I mean, Olympic level, world championship level, best of the best for years. And she said she's just turned 41, and she's not getting faster. She's getting slower. And she said that, even when she was at her very best, she knew she wasn't the very best in the world, but she still wanted to find out what her own best was. And I mean, she was among the very best of the best. So she's competitive, but she said rather than sort of hanging on and trying to stay at that level in that discipline, she wanted to try something new. And so the trail racing was really cool to hear her be very very vulnerable about that. She said she went on her first trail race and got her ass kicked, and but was as proud of herself for finishing that race and going into a whole new realm as she was of any of her victories.
Yeah, it's funny. We've had top cyclists from Tour de France go and do this new race we acquired called La Ruta.
Okay.
And here are people that have done the Tour de France. La Ruta is only, it's under a couple 100 miles. And they've said, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life because it's through the jungle. It's a whole different animal, but it requires a mindset to be able to put yourself out there.
Absolutely.
And try something new like that.
When especially like someone like her, she could ride on her laurels forever. I mean, she is truly one of the greatest runners in U.S. history. And to take on something where she isn't going to go out and dominate yet. And I'm sure when she came into the realm, people in trail are like, because she's only going to get better and better, right? Yep. But just a really, really cool person. And but she also talks about how 2 things that I love that she said. One is being good at something is a double-edged sword because it comes with an expectation. Once you're established as good, you got to be good and you got to live up to that expectation.
And there's a lot of knives and darts coming at your back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people are training and awake all day, every day with your target in their sights.
Your poster on their wall because they're chasing you. Yeah. But I also loved when she said how important it is to be bad at something. And that was really cool. And she said, I'm terrible at basketball. And she said, but when I go out and play, I'm still trying my best. I'm still having fun. I don't want people to make fun of me. And she said, and once she realized that, it made a huge difference for her when there'd be a new runner. And there's no judgment. There's no anything. She's like, and so
she knew. You mean she knew then what it felt like?
She knew what it felt like. Yeah, and I love that. Like there's like again a real humility with her where she said, I may be good at this, but it doesn't make me better than that person. I thought that was really really cool.
Yeah, I like that.
another thing that she didn't talk about in this, but she's become well known in sport for this. So she was a huge Nike athlete. They were one of her big sponsors. And when she was pregnant, Nike pulled her sponsorship, and they said, we're not paying you until you run again. And she took a stand and said, this isn't fair. Like, this is huge. I've done so much for you, and this is who I am.
I'm a human.
Yeah, and you're making me choose between, raising my child, and so and it actually changed Nike's policy, and she did it with grace and integrity. She wasn't awful about it. She just came out and said, "Hey, this is how I feel," and held a mirror up to Nike, and Nike came around on it. So I think that again, she wouldn't take any more credit than just having spoken her mind, but she changed. Anything that Nike changes sport, and so she really changed sport for women's athletes, and not just herself. She was already towards the tail end of her career when she did that. So
that's awesome. Love to hear stories like that. No, she was amazing, and stories like this definitely inspire me. Hopefully, they inspire those listening to get off the couch and give everything they can to be their personal best.
100%. And you know what? Just go out, and when she said at the end, her 2 big takeaways: do scary things, be vulnerable. So, what was scary for her was leaving the track and going onto the trail. I love when she said, I'm a shuffler. I'm the world's fastest shuffler. But it is true. When you're running on an engineered surface, you have a certain foot strike that doesn't have to take into account variables. So that'd be terrifying to be that person who's been trained to run that way to go on a trail.
But by the way, that's a great sentence for those listening out there and watching, because you can be a shuffler.
Sure,
That's
absolutely.
Okay. Just go do it.
100%. And be willing to take on new things. And that's the other thing that she said is, if you're vulnerable and you're willing to fail, and you actually look and say, what's the worst that could happen? Like, if I go out and I'm the last person to finish this race, who cares? And she said, and once she looked at that, her world opened up dramatically, because she didn't have to limit herself to the things she was good at. If she could be open to the possibility she might not be great at this and do it anyway.
The downside isn't that bad.
No, and look at how big the world suddenly gets. So yeah, I took a lot away from that interaction with her, and she was a lot of fun on the panel too.
So if you're out there, we want to hear from you. Send us a note. What are you going to it? What are you going to shuffle at?
Sure.
We want to hear your shuffle stories, right? What are you going to attempt to do that you're not good at? Because we don't want to hear about the stuff you're good at. That's too easy.
Sure. So you know what? Joe mentioned YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, anywhere that you listen to this podcast, watch this podcast, interact with us, Instagram, Facebook. Make sure that you connect with us. Answer Joe's question. What's the thing that you're going to do that you're not good at, that you're going to put yourself out there, be vulnerable, try something scary? Thanks so much.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by True Form Runner. Conquer your next race with a complete training solution from Spartan and True Form. The Spartan True Form trainer will redefine your running, improve your form, and reduce injury. Save 10% with the code SPARTAN10 at trueformrunner.com/Spartan. That's trueformrunner.com/Spartan.